Hello, I'm a J Critic, and I remember because I have to. Fresh off reviewing V for Vendetta, we're going to be looking at how they should have done a second one, because they should have done a second one, and you know what, they didn't. If Jay Ward wants to rebook wrestling angles on Wrestling with Uniqueness, I'm going to remake movies and or make my own. Today we're looking at V for Vendetta 2. So this preposterous thing, this mask, which seems to be amazing in every way, shape, or form, has found its way into a lot of things. Recently, falling into Mr. Robot. Good job. It's V for Vendetta in a more modern time period, and it's not a movie, it's a television series. Cool. But they never said what they would do after the 5th of November for the gunpowder treason and plot. And they see no reason for the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. Something. Alright, let's look at this. Essentially, I'm going to be making this movie the same way that the V for Vendetta movie was made. It's silly. It's a silly hero book that's supposed to be dark, but honestly, I don't see it as dark. To be honest, it's more of a comedy if you look at it the right way, and you know what, we're going to look at it that way. Basically, a lot of 5 puns were used during this November the 5th. He was in the 5th room. V is the Roman numeral for 5. Fun jokes galore. So, we're gonna have a few of our own. So V decides to die on us at the end of the movie. Thanks a lot, movie studios. Make it real easy for people like me to come along and make a sequel. Alright. So basically, V for Vendetta had spent a year in between, and we don't necessarily know what he did during that time. I'm going to get away. I'm going to use a little cheat code here. We're going to go back to that year. We're going to say that he found some other love besides Evie, and they sort of wanted to give birth to a child. Ding, we're not going on about that. That's the last said about that. So, essentially, this was a bunch of 5 puns. 5 family generations later, and this V likes to strike on, on May the 5th, and you guessed it, the year is going to be 5555. Ding! Now, obviously, this is going to be in a different world. Basically, we're going to go with the good old fashioned, wealthy versus poor scenario. So you have your rich, elegant class, and then on the other hand, you have sort of the poor. And V is sort of in between them. V, because of what he did for London all those years ago, was considered a hero for a long time. A hero to every class. This is when classes actually agreed. Unfortunately, then it deteriorated, and the rich started hating the poor, and the poor started to hate the rich, and so on and so forth, and anarchy ensued. 5 years, or family generations, whatever. The 5th V, after the first one, he's in a really new world. There's technology galore, and everybody seems to forget about the old ways. Remember that. That's going to come into play later. Moving on now, I guess. So I would basically make this into 2 movies. The endings are basically going to be identical. But the rest of the movie is going to be slightly different, showcasing the 2 protagonists. And you can market it quite nicely with the "Are you a villain? Are you a victim?" Because, if I may quote the script of the movie, hang on. Oh, jeez. If I were to quote something from V for Vendetta, he described himself as both victim and villain, casted vicariously, or something or other. Basically, it was a bunch of rubbish, in my opinion. We only saw him really act villainous once, and that was to Evie. And he was trying to, I think, show her freedom. Or something. He was trying to show her freedom and how not to be scared. Basically, that's about it. That's the closest to villain he gets. I mean, I guess if you count killing people as villainous acts, then, well, yeah, he killed a lot of people, but, I mean, the movie goes out of its way to prove why he kind of needed to kill them, so I don't count it. It's like Jason Todd. Anyways, so, 2 movies. I'm going to talk about the ending first, because it's the only thing that's going to be similar about these 2 movies, and then we'll get into sort of how they're different. Cool. Let's do it. The ending is essentially, it ties together at a fight between Evie and V. They were fighting all throughout the city for different reasons. They're both out to prove something to, not really to each other, although they do that inadvertently in the end. It's quite nice. Basically, this is where we sort of turn society into the villain, like, kind of on the fly. I mean, we can sort of plant those seeds in throughout Evie's story arc, but, yeah. So basically, together, Evie and V go to stop, the rich, and to try to keep there being minimum death rates, because I like that. They just sort of show the ruler the error of their ways and why they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They stand down, and once again, Evie and V are considered heroes yet again. Hooray! But how did they get to this point? Well, this is why we're gonna split them up. Essentially, if you go to the villain side, which is the one I think I put more time and effort into, it looks at the journey of V and how he became this not only incredibly awesome fighter, but how he sort of gets to the big fight with Evie, and then from there to fulfill his sort of vendetta, because we're tying this in, right? On the victim side, we take a look at Evie. Evie's story and sort of how she became this incredible fighter, and what she's out to prove. She's a victim of what society thinks of rich people, and V is a villain, is basically portrayed as a villain because he likes to kill people who commit crimes. I mean, we can see why, but they can't because their society is crazy, kind of like the Givers, only not that bad. So, let's take a look at the victim side, everybody. So essentially, I'm gonna clear this up right now. V and Evie are sort of like brother and sister. No, they're not. Evie was this random chick who has some connection to the original V and the original Evie. How? We're not gonna say. And it'll probably never be explained. Or it might. Who knows? Perhaps this could be the 5th Evie. Like, Evie's child could have been a female, and they could have had another female, and they could have had another female, then they could have had another female, and then they could have had another female, and on this one, it's like, okay, we're naming her Evie. The 5th one is an Evie. The V's have had a generation of just being named V, so V1 that we saw from V for Vendetta went to V2, V3, V4, V5. So now we're on this one. V lives in a whole new world. He knows all of his past V's skills and abilities, as well as learning sort of the newer stuff. He's one of the smarter kids, and that's why he's basically in the rich school. He's the poorest guy there, because he's poor on money and cash, but he is not poor on brains and intelligence. He's actually one of the smartest kids there, and oftentimes a lot of the rich kids try to buy his knowledge. Unfortunately, he doesn't work like that. On the side, V sort of does vigilante stuff. Cool. So basically what we're doing is we're on the victim side, we're trying to prove why Evie is tough enough and is good enough to go toe-to-toe with Mr. V here, because we know V is a very skilled fighter, as we're about to explain later. But why is Evie Hammond that good? Well, or is Evie good? So, basically, she has taken note of V's actions. Now, this is where they sort of differ, as you're about to find out. When I take a look at the villain side of the story, we're never gonna see Evie's sort of attacks and Evie's things. And on the victim side, you never see how V does his stuff. We don't see how V kills his victims or does what he does to those victims. On the victim side, and on the villainous side, we don't see what Evie attempts to do to some people. Sometimes it works, sometimes it fails because she's new at this. So yeah, basically this is just the underdog story. We build up Evie over the slow course of time to prove herself to be worthy enough so that about halfway through the movie, we see, okay, she can actually go toe-to-toe with V. V has a few old-school tricks up his sleeve, because like I said, V knows everything that the past few Vs would know, and is still learning even some new combat stuff. So he almost thinks psychologically as a strategy, nobody else is going to know the past fighting techniques. So basically, busting them out will give him the edge, essentially, because nobody knows them. Nobody's ever seen the old school stuff in, like, forever. So it's like, my advantage comes from knowing the old school way of combat. Hooray! The old school winning. Fantastic. Evie is sort of defeated by V, but she has a strong showing. V notices this. They both sort of hide under masks. I don't know what Evie would hide under, what kind of mask hers would look like, but yeah, so she has her own nice looking mask, and V is still using this one. He's using the Guy Fawkes one, because it all makes sense. So yeah, he wears that one. They sort of reveal each other's identities. Evie is surprised, V is surprised, they're like shocked, and in a sense it almost gives them that mutual respect, because they just put each other to the limit and they went to the same school and they didn't even realize it. Cool. So, Evie's story is basically, I'm gonna prove that not all rich people deserve to be killed, kind of story with V, leading into the big final battle where they teach the big leader that you shouldn't be doing this. You shouldn't judge people by how much money they have. Good stuff. Yeah. Moving on to the villain side of the tale. V's story is basically the one of the awkward child who doesn't fit into society for obvious reasons. There becomes a slight mystery element to it when we see random killings. Ooh. Some random poor people get killed. We obviously don't see it, because you see that on the victim side of the tale. But on the villain side of the tale, who's been killing the poor? Could it be the cops? No, it couldn't be. They wouldn't go to theatrical lengths. See, the V in V for Vendetta was a very artistic person. You notice it if you read the books, and you notice it throughout the movies when he talks about, bringing out orchestras in the form of blowing things up. He's a very dramatic person who probably had a degree in arts, give or take. So it makes perfect sense that this V would still have that same desire. So noticing the theatrical ways some of the poor have been killed, stabbed through the cross type thing, just some overall nice things. The poor start to wonder, was this V? And V is sort of trying to prove himself, why he didn't do it, and, all that stuff. Of course, they all believe him in the end, because he figures out it was Evie and under her alias or whatever, so. I mean, what can you say? Really. On May the 5th, they do this whole big shebang thing, and it's cool. Yeah. That's how I would do V for Vendetta 2. Basically, you could get 2 movies out of it for the price of 1, and then you can make one nice long one where you go in the timeline order for each character. Maybe you can see more of the rise and the fall of the V's. Maybe you can see why this EV is special, just as special as the first one. And you can sort of see them both grow and rise as people, to realize that their society is not as good as they thought it was, and that they're the only two who can truly save it. Yeah, that should be cool. But yeah, let me know if you guys would like to see that V for Vendetta 2 movie that I just did. If you do, hit that like button. And if you want more, how Hollywood should have made, or even if you want more videos where I just remake or make movies all my own, let me know. If you guys are big fans of the J Critic, put it down in the comment section down below. I want to hear what you guys want me to either make or review next. Please go ahead, go crazy. Just do it. It would be cool. Anyways, I'm the J Critic on the J Ward channel. Subscribe if you're not subscribed for more of this amazing goodness. I'm the J Critic. We'll see you all later.